should I start letting people in? We have about 10 people in the waiting room.
Yeah, I guess we should let people in.
Oh, it's 7 o'clock.
Yeah. Otherwise,
This is nice
Jen
and
said,
early
how were
for
the
me.
dogs?
Whose dogs?
Ours. Morgan is home with the dogs,
Ah,
with the babies, the fur babies. Hello, everyone. I think folks are starting to stream in. Hi, Maddie Lou.
Hi, James.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. This is your virtual meeting of my daughter I've been talking about.
I know. I'm excited. Nice. Yeah.
hello.
Guess we'll wait till maybe 7:03 or so, maybe 5, make it good and even. I guess we can probably get started, Jen, because you have like your maintenance stuff you want to go through. All right, I'm gonna get started, y'all. I see people are still streaming in. I thank you for showing up. I really appreciate it. This is our last night with the American Black History series. I just want to remind everyone that the series is underwritten and sponsored by our amazing sponsors, and I mean that Maddie's Fund and Tito's for Dog People. Our donors are special. They truly believe in what we're doing. And I also want to remind you all that this whole series is to spread awareness of the very limited number of African American veterinarians that we have in this country. It's only about 2% of veterinarians in the country are African American. And I think, Maddie Lou, only 4% are Indigenous American. And so we have a really incredible shortage of veterinarians overall, but we have a real shortage in the vein of BIPOC participation. So on the micro level, obviously it's about veterinarians getting through school. On a larger level, it's making sure BIPOC kids get through school in general. And all college is expensive, but veterinary school is incredibly expensive. Hopefully I'm not missing anything. I'm just going to jump into it. I am here with Adia Evans. And yes, it's not a coincidence. She is my daughter. And I'm here with my friend. I don't want to say out loud how far we go back because we both had no gray hair to be seen. I think it was I want to say 87 when we met.
83.
80, stop playing. 87 is when we graduated from high school. Good God, Ernest, thank you for keeping me honest. Both Ernest and Adia are just phenomenal artists. I'm not going to go into their full bios because we have such a limited time. But I will say all of us, all three of us are when I say multi, I mean not just 2 or 3, but multi award-winning artists. And we happen to hail from Baltimore. And all of us went to Baltimore School for the Arts. Ernest and I warmed up the space for Adia, and she came in a few generations later. But Adia is an opera singer, and Ernest is a visual artist. Mostly his painting and murals, and I'm not featuring my work, but obviously I spent a lot of times in the mass comms industry, mass communications, design, and some time in the architectural space. So with that, we're just gonna get started. Um, I I will get started by saying that we were all classically trained, and sort of the underpinning of that is that there was almost no reference whatsoever to Africa, this huge continent. Um, we were trained under the auspices of learning the classics, right? And it wasn't until after, at least for me, until after college and moving into the workspace, started thinking about, wow, like we all three of us had this amazing arts education. We were around incredibly talented people as students, incredibly talented teachers and instructors, but almost no focus whatsoever on African art and how it influences American art. Um, for instance, I talked to a colleague years ago about the influences of Egyptian art, right? Ernest and I, art history, we had hours, literally hours a week of um, of art history. And the ancient Egyptians are really ancient Africans, but it's never presented that way. And so it just really makes you think about um, how in this culture, a culture that's been incredibly whitewashed, literally, even art is suppressed. The beginnings of art are suppressed. And so much of it comes from West Africa, because I don't know that you all know this, but most of the slave trade was West Africa to the East Coast. You would not obviously want to travel around to the east end of Africa. So most African Americans hail from Western areas of Africa. With that, I'm gonna just jump in with my first question for Adia and Ernest, and ask, what did I write down here? Sorry, I have senior moments. What what does it mean to you to have been classically trained in art?
Okay. I'll start. Hi everyone. Thank you for coming. For my industry, which is classical music, which is a misnomer in and of itself, but opera specifically for me means, I feel like industry wide, it means undergraduate education. As Dad mentioned, we all went to Baltimore School for the Arts, so we sort of had the jump on our colleagues in a lot of ways, where we got to start at an arts high school. But 4 years or 5 years of undergrad, and 2 years of graduate study, and then a period of sort of apprenticeship that doesn't really end. It ends when you sort of get to management and start having your own gigs and get to the true like freelance of opera singing, where you put your own gigs together. So that training is incredibly long. We have these conversations, artists all the time have these conversations where people will be like, oh, you're so talented. And it's like, yeah. I went to school and I studied and I studied and I studied and I practiced and I practiced and I practiced. But there is an enormous amount of information missing in that study. I just sort of listed 10 years of study, more than that so far. And even then, we have semesters and semesters of music history. It's mandated that you have sort of a semester of music history all the way through your schooling, all the way through undergraduate and grad school. And all of it is focused on what we call Western music. And it goes from antiquity. Funny that you mentioned antiquity. dead because it doesn't concern Africa at all. Like it doesn't cover Africa or any other country in any way.
Exactly.
It starts with the Greeks. So those textbooks always start for us with the Greeks. Then we go 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th century, all the way through to 20th. It almost has no industry connection to what's happening now, and no sort of discussion about any other cultures other than Western European. We don't even talk about Eastern Europeans, Asia, and definitely not Africa, and definitely not even American, and definitely not African American music. That is all sort of squeezed into one semester. You're only required to take one semester of ethnomusicology, and ethnomusicology is all the rest, from throat singing all the way through. They try to cover all of Africa in that one semester class. So 10 years.
Is that during February?
It's not. You get to take it whenever you can squeeze it. And you have to take, the other ones are sort of mandated. In ethnomusicology, you only have to take one semester, and it's supposed to cover that entire time span for all the rest of the countries in the world. So for my industry, that is what classically trained means, is studying, Monteverdi, Mozart, all the way through to Previn, maybe, who is no longer a living composer, but almost entirely white and Western European.
Awesome. Ernest.
That was very well said.
I know.
So I'm just gonna say what she said. No, it's an interesting question also because, like James said, not only were we trained at the Baltimore School for the Arts, we also witnessed our children being trained at the Baltimore School for the Arts. So it's also, to get to see that or experience that as a parent. My daughter graduated as a dance major. She went through as a dance major. And to see them to have to deal with some of the same trials and tribulations that we dealt with, it was very interesting. So what does it mean to be classically trained? I'll start by saying this. When I got to college, I have to say that it wasn't much from a technical standpoint that we hadn't covered in the 4 years of high school. Now we had art history for 4 years from September to June.
Yeah.
We had 4 years of art history. So, that's a very thorough curriculum and of art history for 4 years. So when I got to college, I went to class 3 days, first day, midterm, and final, and passed the course in Western art history. I took African art, but it wasn't until I took African Americans in art that I could link and put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And we don't have time to fully go into that. But that wasn't until I took an art history class with Professor Angela Franklin at Morgan State University. So even our education at HBCUs is still considered classical training. It's just that it may come with, and some of that information may be taught through a different lens. I will say that from a skill standpoint, you couldn't be, we were getting a college level education in high school.
We got a college level education in high school.
We most definitely did. And I'm still benefiting from that. There was one day, and James, you may remember this.
I'll try.
Like Adia said, we knew all about the Picassos and the Modiglianis, and I don't remember if it was Modigliani or Picasso, but our art history teacher, Stephen Kent, juxtaposed an African mask. I think it was a Fang mask, a Fang from the, with a Picasso painting.
Yeah.
And it's the very first time that I I was aware that Africa had any influence on Europe, or let me say the West. Because if
Right.
we're talking from a cultural standpoint, I include the United States in with Europe as far as an Anglo-European, from a Western ideological perspective. From a classical academic perspective. So, from a skills perspective, Baltimore School for the Arts is up there with any of the other fine arts high schools in the country, and maybe anywhere in the world. From a cultural standpoint, being Black and being from West Baltimore, I have to say I was blessed to have two parents. James, we were born in the late 60s. So
Yeah.
70s and 80s molded us. So we're part of the hip hop generation. So there was no
Right.
lack of Blackness. We just came after the Black Arts movement, So we knew we were Black. And that helped us navigate that classical training at the Baltimore School for the Arts. I'm sure it helped Adia and Aja navigate that. But I will say I'm grateful for that air quote classical training, because it gave me the tools I needed from a skills perspective. I didn't have to focus really on the skills perspective once I got to college and then I furthered education. I could focus on the other things, the other aspects of the art world that needed my attention. I'll stop there.
No, that's beautiful. I mean, I am not angry about the lack of arts education as it pertains to the African continent, but it does hurt to see it so willfully missing and not taken seriously. The Egyptians influenced the Greeks enormously, right? And so to start with Greece, and to not start with Africa is just so Northern American. That's about the kindest thing I can say. But at a skill level, I mean, there was no one in my college life that could match where we were on a skill level. And it is probably in part, aside from the financial obligations, the reason why I did not finish in art school, because I felt like I was ready to go. I mean, I had been armed. I was ready to just start working, which is what I did. But one of the things that Stephen did, it was a quote that he gave us. It was a Picasso quote that you bring it up. It was something like, good artists copy and great artists steal. And it just makes me think how interesting it is that we participated in the theft of our own sort of cultural heritage without being aware of it at all. Right. So we're clear, and we're part of the clear and present transfer of knowledge. And no one ever stopped to say to us, hey, by the way, like the continent you all hail from is rich and deep, and you should like study it when you get a chance. But anyway, we could talk about the first question all night. I'm gonna ask the second one. So Ernest, you kind of answered this, but I'm gonna ask you to abbreviate that. But when obviously with this this did not happen for us inside of high school setting, but when did you realize how deep and incredible the African diaspora was in terms of visual arts? I mean, you can see it in your paintings in the background. I don't know if you all can see Ernest's work back there, but there's so much of his work that's like, I'm going to use the word cloaked in the most beautiful way, like cloaked in these like symbols that are on top of what might be considered classically painted portraits. So you can take that,
Okay.
sir.
No, good stuff. So yeah, I left Baltimore in '87. I went to University of Maryland, College Park. David Driscoll was there at the time. I didn't study with David Driscoll. I didn't take advantage of that situation. And I was there for about 2.5 years. Plus the fraternity, did all the fun stuff, right? Oh, that's right. Wait a minute. Adia, did you go to Maryland? That's
Yeah.
right.
So did your art history teacher, by the way. Stephen
Oh,
Kent also
So
went
does
to-
Stephen.
Yes.
Yeah.
okay. Well, I didn't do my homework. So I had to leave College Park after 2.5 years. And I ended up at Morgan and my art history, my African American art history teacher in fall 1992, 91 or 92 was Angela Franklin. And she taught, it's the first time that she taught African Americans in art. Funny thing is that I teach that course now, but it was that course. There were other moments, like there was seeds planted, like when Stephen juxtaposed that African man with Picasso, that was a seed he planted. But when I took her course and I began to understand, so it's like, after I took her course, I went back and took African art over again. I went back and took history of Western art 1 and 2 over again. I went back and took modern art over again. I literally went back and took all the art history courses I had taken before, because what it did for me was it made me understand that my work was not simply an exhibition of skill. My
Exactly.
work, you know what I mean, should have something to say. It's not for my own self-aggrandizement. It's really, I'm a member of a much larger community, much even larger than West Baltimore, Maryland, the United States. You know what I mean? I'm a part of
Yep.
a global community, and my work should speak to that. So that, among others, but that I would probably say is the most pivotal moment, because then African art began to make sense to me, because I began to see and dispel the myth that all was taken from us during
Right.
the enslavement of African people. I began to understand the difference of enslavement in Protestant slaveholding territories and Catholic slaveholding territories. Funny enough, Maryland was the only Catholic colony.
Exactly.
And we happen to be from that. But yeah, there's a distinct difference in how the enslaved African could navigate their enslavement from a spiritual perspective and an artistic perspective, based on whether it was a Protestant slaveholding territory or Catholic slaveholding territory. And I learned these things in that course. So I probably would say that's probably when, and that's my early 20s, I began to understand the enormity of the influence of Africa, African, specifically West and Central, as you said earlier, West African culture, pre-colonial West African culture.
Right. See, listen to you. It's so funny to hear you, because I knew you when you were 14, 15. I mean, it was such a long time ago. And just for reference, we were watched like hawks when we first entered into that building,
Yeah, that's
truth.
true. That's true.
But Adia, same question to you. Sort of, when did you start learning about what you weren't being taught versus what you were being taught?
So I'm going to talk really fast because there's a lot of ways to address this. One, what you just said, Ernest, really reminded me of Nina Simone, who I watch talk all the time just because we love her.
Yeah.
Talking about vehemently, as she does, how it is paramount that our art speak on our times and on our communities. And she says, you always have the choice, you have the choice to ignore it. But that was always her goal. So wonderful person to also have that goal. So a couple things for me, and this is something I've been thinking about as we've been getting closer to this talk, is one, our influence on art in our classical art forms and African influence underneath, right? And for us, African Americans, and also how we're represented within these forms now, because there's obviously a lack of representation in the classical form as it is. I sing opera, which for the time being is predominantly for the time being, because we have lots of seeds of hope. You know, I just
Right.
saw an opera. There's an opera out right now that is going to the Met. It was just announced today, that is about the life of Malcolm X. You know, but there are,
Wow.
which is amazing. And there's more interest in stories like ours. There's Champion, about an amazing black boxer that is at the Met. There's Blue coming to the Met. So there is a hunger for seeing Black people on stage and hearing our music on stage. And Fire Shut Up on My Bones was one of the first new works, and the first by a Black composer that's at the Met. So while a lot of my work involves European work, it is also highlighting that new work. So that's an intro to what I'm going to say, which is that my first teacher at BSA, my private lesson teacher, was Robert Cantrell, who is an amazing bass baritone based out of Baltimore. And he did everything in his power to make sure that his students, who were obviously from majority were from Baltimore and were Black, that we knew our music. And he was very subtle. And as Ernest said, it was like planting the seeds. He gave us art songs by Black composers. It was a part of our sort of mandatory. He went to that book first, the Anthology of Black Art Song. And he didn't even say anything. He pulled it out and taught it to us as you would any other composer. And it wasn't until you started doing research, and as you get older, you get to more independent about choosing your own repertoire and choosing your own things. It wasn't until I think my first year of college that I was no, my second year of high school, that I looked up John W. Work, because he gave me a piece called Soliloquy that I sing to this day on
I
recitals.
remember that one.
And I love that piece. It talks about the philosophy, a life philosophy. If death be only half as sweet as life, I will not fear to go, is the poetry. And I assumed that was a white man. His name is John Work. And when I looked him up, I was like, wait a minute. This is a Black man. And come to find out, not only is he a composer and a collector of Black art song, and not just spirituals, all Black art song. His father before him was also a collector of Black art song. And there is a enormous legacy of Black people collecting and showing and sharing and preserving our music, and sharing it amongst one another. And I think Mr. Cantrell gave me a great gift for showing me those things early on. I mean, I learned several of those songs before I left school, and they felt familiar to me. They felt like my music that I grew up with. And I was surprised that people didn't know them when I got to University of Maryland, College Park. And I was like, oh, we don't actually talk about Black song at all. Like, we have this huge art song tradition, and there are amazing songs that and really great dialogues we can have about what is appropriate for Black singers to sing only, in group and out group dialogue, right? Like what we can share with white folks that they can share and ally and champion for us, and the things that we can bring ourselves and tell our own stories and our own narratives. So Mr. Cantrell gave me that great gift very early on, and he himself also represented excellence in opera. He, before that, I wanted to be one of the only, from my vantage point, I didn't know any Black opera singers. And he not only exposed me to other Black opera singers that were amazing, he gave me, for my senior recital, a collection of Leontine Price, the full collection of Leontine Price recordings. He himself is an opera singer, so he brought us to dress rehearsals at Washington National Opera which at the time I didn't know how big of a deal that was, but that is one of our A houses, our #1 houses in the country and the world. And I was able to see him perform there, and see him, and he would take us through through the opera house and sit us all so that we could see him on stage and also see the level of excellence that we could achieve. And so those are my first experiences with both experiencing our influence on the art form and our representation inside of it.
Wow, that's amazing. Like there's so many things that come up for me, particularly that sort of Black excellent narrative that you spoke to earlier, Ernest, that we were born in a certain time, you know, and I'm 68. What are you?
69. I forgot you had me.
Oh yeah, I got you. I got you by a year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean it that was sort of instilled in us. I think there was this sense of our parents' generation and grew up with this concept, even in the sciences. They had to argue against the concept that they were not animals, that they were not chimpanzees, that they were fully fledged human beings, capable of achieving great things. And particularly, I think, our Black teachers really drilled in on that. Carol Bayard, who was is a multi Caldecott winner, who unfortunately is no longer with us. I mean, she ran a classroom. She had us as focused as I think was humanly possible for young people. I mean, we were as focused as I've seen any collegiate classroom, and so it's just amazing. I I'm going to show 2 short videos to cover some other parts of the African art experience that we don't have on this call. Both a little clip on dance, and I'm going to share a clip from our very own Stephen Parker, who is a percussionist, and his sort of insights on how percussion it affects. Oh, hold on one second before I share my screen. I don't want to get to your song too quickly, Adia, because your grandmother's on here too, by the way. So I want to make her wait
Hi,
to hear you to
Grandmama.
the end. All right, so this one, can you all see my screen? All right, this one is on dance. It's only 4 minutes or so.
We can see it, but we can't hear it then.
You still can't hear it?
Nope.
Hold on one sec.
Rhythms, just like ancestors did with drums in Haiti or in the Yoruba communities of West Africa.
How about now?
It was, this is the bop.
Yes, no.
The bop is a type of social dance. Dance is a language, and social dance is an expression that emerges from a community. A social dance isn't choreographed by any one person. It can't be traced to any one moment. Each dance has steps that everyone can agree on, but it's about the individual and their creative identity. Because of that, social dances bubble up, they change, and they spread like wildfire. They are as old as our remembered history. In African American social dances, we see over 200 years of how African and African American traditions influenced our history. The present always contains the past, and the past shapes who we are and who we will be. The Juba dance was born from enslaved Africans' experience on the plantation. Brought to the Americas stripped of a common spoken language, this dance was a way for enslaved Africans to remember where they're from. It may have looked something like this. Slapping thighs, shuffling feet, and patting hands. This was how they got around the slave owners' ban on drumming. Improvising complex rhythms, just like ancestors did with drums in Haiti or in the Yoruba communities of West Africa. It was about keeping cultural traditions alive and retaining a sense of inner freedom under captivity. It was the same subversive spirit that created this dance, the cakewalk, a dance that parodied the mannerisms of Southern high society, a way for the enslaved to throw shade at the masters. The crazy thing about this dance is that the cakewalk was performed for the masters, who never suspected they were being made fun of. Now you might recognize this one. 1920s, the Charleston. The Charleston was all about improvisation and musicality, making its way into Lindy Hop, swing dancing, and even the Kid and Play, originally called the Funky Charleston. Started by a tight-knit Black community near Charleston, South Carolina, the Charleston permeated dance halls where young women suddenly had the freedom to kick their heels and move their legs. Now, social dance is about community and connection. If you knew the steps, it meant you belonged to a group. But what if it becomes a worldwide craze? Enter the twist. It's no surprise that the twist can be traced back to the 19th century, brought to America from the Congo during slavery. But in the late 50s, right before the Civil Rights Movement, the twist is popularized by Chubby Checker and Dick Clark. Suddenly, everybody's doing the twist. White teenagers, kids in Latin America, making its way into songs and movies. Through social dance, the boundaries between groups become blurred. The story continues in the 1980s and 90s. Along with the emergence of hip hop, African-American social dance took on even more visibility, borrowing from its long past, shaping culture and being shaped by it. Today, these dances continue to evolve, grow, and spread. Why do we dance? To move, to let loose, to express. Why do we dance together? To heal, to remember, to say, we speak a common language. We exist and
Can you all see Stefan now?
Not yet.
Okay, I'm going to switch screens. So this is going to be on a little bit on drumming.
We can now.
What's going on, guys? My name is Stephen Parker. I am a drummer and percussionist. Today, I wanted to talk to you guys about the African drum. The most common one now is called the djembe. But before I get into that, I want to talk to you guys about percussion. If you look up percussion, the meaning is the beating or striking of a musical instrument. Part two to that is the act or technique of tapping the surface of a body part to learn the conditions of the parts beneath by the resultant sound. For me, I kind of find it funny that the first part is the beating or striking of a musical instrument, and then the second part refers to the body. For me, being a drummer and a percussionist, I feel like every part of my body has at some point been my percussional instrument or what I've used to make most of my beats as I kind of go through life. You know, it's part of who I am. But if we go back and we look at the djembe, and as it pertains to its origin, it was invented in the 12th century by the Mandite tribe, who is now Mali, and it was in West Africa. It was played for generations as part of ritualistic life in Mali, Ghana, Senegal, and other neighboring West African countries, most of which was used in communication to celebrate, mourn, and inspire. They were played at times of peace and at times of war. A lot of it was during planting, harvesting, birth, and death. Drums have been such a large part in Africa's daily experience for so long that drumming pulses through their collective unconscious. And I find that to be true even within us. Just simply walking, we are literally playing drums. And it sounds crazy. It really does. It really sounds crazy to say, but I've often been able to teach people how to play drums just by walking. If you walk to a beat, or if you walk to your heartbeat, or if you're just walking to a pulse, you are creating waveforms every time your foot strikes the ground. Remember, I said percussion is by striking or by hitting. Your feet is hitting the ground. You're beating the pavement, so to speak. And so just by living, we are all engaging in what we would call drumming or percussion. And for me, it hits home personally because I always love the sound of the African drum. I've always loved the sound of drums, period. They literally saved my life. It felt like it gave me a lifeline, a way of expressing who I was in a way that I wasn't able to verbally at the time. My drumming actually gave me my freedom. My drumming gave me the pulse that I now am able to walk with, the confidence that I'm able to walk with, the healing that I needed in certain moments and certain times, all came from being able to play what we will call the drums or the percussion instruments. Specifically with the djembe, it's something about the high-pitched sound that kind of just pierces pain away, or the low frequencies that feels like it can just break up anything that you have coming up against you. It can literally just help you war against as much as you may come against in life. You know, put on a good djembe beat one day, or put on a good conga line, and see how you feel afterwards. It'll literally help save a lot of the stress that you have going on. It'll help relieve some of the anxiety that you have. And that's what it was meant to do. You know, it's all innately a part of us. And for me personally, I love it. I love it and I enjoy it. And I just figured I'd come on and share this with you all. But I could go on and on and on about the djembe. Definitely look it up at your own time. But brief history on the djembe. So as you guys can hear, even in the video and the music that's playing in the background, this is from the Black is King album. And even Beyonce herself had to go back to her roots and go back and capture some of these moments of these African rhythms and these African beats that have carried over from the 12th century all the way up until now. They play out all through her Black is King album. They play all out on the big screens when we deal with the Black Panther, when we deal with Woman King. All of the things that we're watching, even in our in our present day, to think that it started from back in the 12th century in West Africa, when the djembe was invented, up until now. It's amazing. Again, I spoke on how it pulsates through our every footstep. It drives our life and it drives who we are. And even till this day, it's still very, very, very prevalent in our modern day music.
So I'm going to jump to summertime. And I'm going to save the last question for the Q&A, to start off the Q&A. But I'll just say one of the reasons why, well, for one, I should say Look, when we talk about Beyonce, we talk about multi-Grammy award-winning artists and their baseline music and percussions linking to Africa, you don't win Grammys because 13% of the population, which is African American, loves your music. You win Grammys because the larger group of the populace loves your music. That means that white folks love African music. And I don't mean African American music, I mean African music. That is the point that Stefan is making, is that the music has been popularized in many ways without the listener, and in some cases, not even with the artist understanding that it's coming from Africa, specifically West African. The reason I asked the Dia to share Summertime with us is because Summertime, the opera, has a complex history. The Haywards, Mr. Hayward, who wrote the book Porgy, and then Mr. and Mrs. Hayward, who not orchestrated, but they first wrote the play Porky. They were deep observers of African American culture. It's not that they had relationships with African Americans; they were observers of that culture. And then Gershwin, who wrote the music for Porgy and Bess, was also a deep observer of African American music, particularly in Harlem. He essentially took that same idea that we talked about with Picasso: good artists copy and great artists steal. Gershwin was a great artist, and there's no question about that. But there's also no question that much of what made Gershwin great was his observation of Black music. And so with that, I'm gonna share this next song. I'm gonna prep it and then share my screen. All right. Everyone see that? I am related to many a genius, but this one is the one I'm the most proud of. Crazy.
I feel you. I feel you, James. I feel you.
Crazy, right? I mean, my last question, we can open up Q&A, is just what's next? What inspires you?
What inspires me? That's hard. Okay. So okay. I have two artists for parents, right? That are multifaceted in their art forms. They've both been administrators and teachers. And it's an amazing thing to grow up with because as Ernest was talking about earlier, I've always been Black, and I've always been proud to be Black. And I've always been very proud of my parents and what they've done. And I grew up knowing that I could make a career in the arts. You know, I went to school with a lot of people, especially in undergrad, where everybody's, you know, bananas. Being like, I don't know if I can make it. I don't know if I can make a career out of this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I don't ever think I had a time where, you know, a privileged position for me where I didn't think I would be able to make this work in some facet or another. I have learned the skills to sing anything, and I continue to refine those. I continue to get better and work to be better. I want to continue to make space for other people to be in the room. You know, there's no reason for me. I mean, I was born in 93. I went to school went to college in 2012 and was one of two Black people in the room. It doesn't make any sense. And part of it is some of those barriers that I purposefully talked about. What is being, you know, classically trained? You know, 10 years of school. Like that is not affordable, and it's not possible for everyone. So I want to make sure that it is easier for people to sort of access an arts education, because the arts taught me discipline. The arts taught me history in a way that was interesting and relevant for me. It taught me many skills that we sort of use every day in and outside of a practice room, a studio. It taught me sort of culture. It taught me all kinds of things, and can teach other people the same. Yeah, let alone the effects on sort of mental health and sort of healing yourself and sort of your soul, and having an outlet for all of those different emotions that we experience as human beings. It's just an essential part of life. I mean, no one goes any days without encountering visual art, music, dance. Like it's silly. So I want to continue to make classically trained artists a place to be for younger people. And within opera, I think it's about storytelling more than anything else. And so I want to tell more of our stories. I want to make sure that we all have space for telling about our culture and commenting on the times. And that requires some change to the industry as we know it. But it also doesn't require throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's like you said, Dad, it's like I'm not upset. I'm not upset about not learning about my culture. I took it upon myself to do that with the skills that I was given and how I was trained. I was able to find out all of that information and find resources for finding out that information with my schooling and with that discipline and with the understanding of what makes what builds excellence and how to improve. So yeah, I want to continue to make spaces for people to learn about this art form and for people to engage and to use the arts to make the place better, the place that we live in. So yeah, I'm inspired. I'm inspired by a lot of things. I'm inspired by conversations like this and my upbringing and making space for more people like me in the work I do.
E.
I'll make this quick. It's funny because the first video you showed, I think that was Camille Brown. That's who Aj is dancing with in New York.
I know.
She just started. Okay, all right, I'm done.
I couldn't have Aja, so
Man, that was beautiful. I also studied traditional West African music, djembe being a part of that for 20 years.
I know.
And that young brother, he hit it. I'm inspired, and Adia she stole my thunder. I'm inspired by talks like this, and specifically this one. Summertime, sung by Adia Evans. That was beautiful. I know I'm supposed to be talking about what inspires me, but I was moved. I fought back the tears. I really did. That was so touching. So yeah, 20-year veteran teaching Baltimore City Public Schools. The young people keep me on my toes. And they really inspire me. Things the Baltimore City Public Schools gets a bad rap. Was often seen negatively in the news media, but there are a lot of beautiful people that work there and a lot of beautiful young people who come through there. And that's my primary motivation, young people.
Yeah, both of you are amazing. And I like in the industry that I work in, advocating for more space for BIPOC and particularly Black people. I say all the time that I grew up with geniuses. It's nothing new to me at all, but the way the world sees where I grew up is very different. You all are proof positive of this. But Dia, you said something that's so interesting to me about wanting to amplify and increase the hunger for our stories being on stage. And I think our stories, there's always been a hunger for our stories on stage because suffering and agony are always interesting. That's why people slow down at car accidents. They want to see carnage. They want to see what it's like to survive. We're all interested by that. And there are few peoples in the universe of humanity that have had more of a horror story than ours. And that interests people. When Porgy was written, it wasn't written because folks thought the story wasn't interesting. What I want to see is not just our stories being on stage, but us being able to be the arbiters of that story, the editors of that story, the writers of that story, the actors and the singers and the artists of those stories, not have them usurped by other people that just simply find our stories interesting. I don't know if there are any questions in the chat, Morgan. Hi, Akeisha. Akeisha has a question. Akeisha is our amazing Chief of Environmental Justice and Policy for C.A.R.E. Go ahead, Akeisha.
Hello. I hope I didn't usurp anybody's question on the chat. But I just Adia, so I wish I could show you. I kind of doing a bunch of stuff in the background, but when you started singing, my bunny who loves music came over. She's blind, her ears perked up. She started purring. That's what bunnies do when they're really happy. And she's still purring. And she doesn't really do that very often. So it seems like you made an impression with everybody. This is just an amazing talk. But I had a question too for Mr. Shaw. You were talking about, I think, a professor of yours that had documented or provided something showing the differences of um, people who were enslaved telling their stories based on whether or not the slaveholder was Protestant or Catholic. And I was wondering if you had a reference for that we could look into.
That's an excellent question. I'll get that information to James. There is definitely scholarship that shows the nuances between the enslaved experience in the United States and the enslaved experience throughout the Caribbean and Central South America, because that being Catholic, you can definitely see it in visual art. Because in Catholic, and I was raised Catholic, in Catholicism, you still have a lot of iconography and idolatry that does not exist in the Protestant religious experience. So, and then it used to be thought that Robert Ferris Thompson is an excellent professor that's done a lot of scholarship on this, but it used to be believed that the enslaved Africans mixed Catholicism with their indigenous religions, but now it's in actuality they didn't mix it. They shielded or they hid the traditional African spiritual systems underneath Catholicism. So they use Catholicism as a shield or as a veneer to hide what they were actually doing from their enslavers. But yeah, I would start with Robert Ferris Thompson as someone who's documented a lot of that work.
And by the way, you all, we're going to put these recordings on the website, the same place you got the registration link, and all of the sort of additional knowledge during the talk we'll be adding to that link. So you can go back in a couple of weeks and find all this additional information there. Any other questions from the chat? Morgan, I don't know if there. No. So y'all, thank you. I have been asked many times, but just recently, what is C.A.R.E's, X factor? What's the thing that is central to us? And
There's a question in the chat now.
And it is love, absolutely. And by the way, sorry, there is a chat question, but our X factor is love, plain and simple. And I would say a priority on people of color and Black people, but love for people in general. What's the question in the chat, Morgan?
I see it. Okay, hi, Francis. Don't be ashamed to admit that you haven't heard of a Black opera singer. That's normal for our stuff to sort of be erased and our people to be erased from the narrative. I don't know if you all know that Marian Anderson was the first sort of Black opera singer to perform at that national level in our country in front of and the Capitol. But I didn't know that until I started studying. I mean, it's not something we talk about very often. People for you to listen to, yes, Leontine Price is amazing. Jesse Norman is amazing. Those are two people who have incredible discographies, and they will lead you to other Black opera singers because there are a ton. People who are currently sort of out and about. Karen Slack is a Black opera singer who is moving around and about right now, who's really, really well connected, and Rayanne Bryce Davis as well. They are all over the place, all over the globe, performing opera. New to Arlington, Virginia. Yes, I have suggestions. Ernest and Ded, you might have other ones for art in general. But if you're interested in hearing good singing, you all have a local opera company, Virginia Opera. I'm trying to remember whether you guys are based in Arlington, but the amazing thing about Virginia Opera is that they move across Virginia with their performances. So they start in Fairfax and they go to Richmond and then they go to Arlington. So there's a lot of wonderful state-based work. They make a point of hiring Black people. My very best friend works there now. Jovan is there now, Dad. And right now they're doing a Traviata featuring a Chinese tenor and a Black soprano. Brandy Sutton is her name. She's also an incredible soprano. Damian Jeter also is someone, this is a lot of things. I'll write it down. Damian Jeter is a composer in your area. He's also incredible. He is one of the only composers to have written a requiem and still be alive. Many of them write their requiems before they die. And his is called an African American Requiem, which uses poetry and quotations from Black folks and from spirituals, and juxtaposed on top of the Latin Mass. So it's a really incredible piece of artwork. There's a movement called I Can't Breathe that is in the time signature of 11/4, based on how many times I Can't Breathe was uttered in that horrible incident. It's really poignant and great artwork. And also Washington National Opera is not far from you since you're in Arlington. And they also make a habit of hiring people of color and telling stories. Anytime you see new works, not that they all have to do with Black folks, but they tend to be more diverse and they tend to be more modern stories and more diverse stories. So those are a lot of options for things for you to see, but Washington National Opera and Virginia Opera are shows for you to, opera companies for you to look out for.
So I do want to make a couple of recommendations that I made notes on that are somewhat related to this talk. Isabel Wilkinson's Cast as a book, Netflix 1619 Project, incredible, and Netflix also High on the Hog, and it talks about the West African influence on our food and culture of eating here. And I know there's some vegans and vegetarians on. I don't want to trigger anybody. There is a good deal of consumption of meat, but if you can get past that and just focus in on the storytelling is incredibly rich. I don't know if you have anything else, Ernest, before we close out and answering these questions, but.
Last thing, I just want to also echo the names of Nathan Carter, Sylvester Campbell, along with Carol Bayard. You know what I mean?
Yep.
As far as Armstrong, I forget her first name. The reason why there is a school for the arts.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes.
Miss
Armstrong. Yeah.
Miss Armstrong. So I just wanted to that there were people in place who understood what we were going through at that school, who helped get us through to the other side, who fought the good fight when we were babies.
That is correct.
In ballet, classical composing and singing, and Nathan Carter's choir at Morgan State University was the #1 college choir in the world.
Yep.
At one point. So, and those folks are no longer with us. So,
yep. And we knew them. You all have been amazing. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm proud to know you, and to our virtual guests as well. So happy you guys spent this time with us. And all this will be recorded on the website. So much appreciated. You guys have a good night. Bye, love.
Bye.
Bye.